Well, good morning, everybody. It's Friday, October 4th, and I thought I'd just take a little tour around our flower gardens once more this year, just to show you a few of the flowers that we still have in bloom. Some of these flowers have been blooming for months non-stop, and you can probably guess what some of them are, but some might be surprises to you, so I thought I'd just take a little tour. Most of our flowers have long since finished blooming. Certainly most of the perennials are long gone, at least for a few weeks anyhow. And you may not be surprised to find out that most of the flowers I'm featuring today are annuals, because annuals tend to bloom the longest throughout the growing season. But I thought I'd just highlight a few of those in case they turn out to be plant types that you'd like to put in your gardens. I'll try to describe a little bit about them and why I like them. Up until a couple years ago, I never had any of these plants in our garden. These are known as beggar's ticks. I believe this one might have been called Blazing Glory. So these are annuals, and they just bloom and bloom and bloom. I even grew some from seeds that I collected from my plants last summer, and they were just a little slower to mature this year than if you bought them already half matured from a nursery. But they do great once they get established. They probably prefer a slightly moister soil, although I've had some of these do great in very dry sites too. But they're very pretty. We've got this gold one here. As I mentioned, it might be Blazing Glory, but we might have a different one as well of this color spectrum. They have a lot of different types. But that's the beauty of them. You plant them, they're healthy, they're strong, and they last forever. They're still going. We haven't had a frost yet here in southern Ontario, which is kind of unusual. Often we'll get them by mid to late September. We still haven't had one now. It looks like this upcoming week we're going to get close. And another Bidens in our gardens. This one is called Biddy Boom Red. So it's similar to the first one, but much more orangey in color overall than the other one that had quite a few bright yellow stripes in it. This is another one of the beggar's ticks plants. And this is a pink version. This is known as Pretty in Pink. And here in this garden, it's formed a large mound of beautifully light pink flowers in a circular fashion, standing about 1.5 feet or 2 feet high in the middle. And just beautiful. It's been flowering for months out here. Cosmos are another one of my favorite annuals. They have light feathery foliage that doesn't do a lot of shading on the plants underneath, so sometimes you can mix them in with smaller plants and the smaller plants will still do well. They won't be totally shaded out. But probably a better place for them is at the rear of a garden where they can grow tall and not interfere with other plants, as long as they're getting full sunshine. They really need full sunshine. So this is one of our potted tuberous begonias that's been just blooming and blooming and blooming all summer. And we often get these by transferring hanging plants that we'll just get at any nursery, and then we transfer them into a larger pot that sits on the ground. And the better soil and moisture regime, keeping them wet easier, really helps them out. And this has just been in profusion of bloom for, as I mentioned, months. So this is the first year I've managed to find these varieties of salvia that I'm going to show in the next two clips here. I found these at a larger garden center down towards Trenton earlier in the spring. I don't see them typically anywhere else. I don't really see these for sale at Canadian Tire or Home Depot or Lowe's or anything. So I snatched up a couple of these when I saw them. I saw these in a lady's garden down near Point Pelee a couple falls ago. And I was really impressed by them, the size they got to, the numbers of flowers they had at that time of year. and the way the bees and the hummingbirds really love them. And you can maybe see here, there are some bumblebees still attending them because, as we mentioned, there aren't a whole lot of other flowers around, but even when the flowers are more profuse generally, these plants are really highly liked by bees and hummingbirds. This particular one, which has a beautiful sky blue color, I guess you'd call it, almost a bit of a mauvey color, is called Rockin' Blue Suede Shoes. I'm not sure how well the color will reproduce here, but hopefully it'll give you the impression that it's a deep purple. And this is called Rockin' Deep Purple. It's the same type of plant as the other one. It's a salvia. These are now 3.5 to 4 feet tall, at least the other one was. This one's shorter. But again, a profusion of flowers that the bees, other insects, and hummingbirds really like. So that to me is a strong reason to have them in the garden, and hopefully next year I can get more of these. And this is yet another type of salvia. Are we seeing a trend here? I think so. This is called Salvia Victoria Blue, and I've had this for years. It's a plant that's been around for many years, and it just does great. The main thing about these salvias is they can take a lot of drought, real dry conditions. I don't baby these gardens. I rarely ever water them. Occasionally in the summer I may if it becomes really dry, but I'm certainly not the type of person that goes out watering my flower gardens every night or anything like that. I should be, I guess, but I don't. And these salvias just cruise right through, unaffected by and large. You can see these Victoria Blue salvia, how beautifully they're blooming still on October 4th. Just beautiful plants, and these are now 2.5 feet tall. And this is one of my several clumps of portulaca that I have. I always liked this little ground hugging plant with its succulent leaves. Right now in early morning the flowers remain somewhat closed, but when the sun hits them they start to open up like little roses and they become really beautiful. So this one is called Happy Hour Orange, and it's been doing great here. And it was even living under heavy shade from this tree that's in the garden, which I've now trimmed back so it's producing less shade, but they can live in somewhat partial shade, but again, it's a plant that prefers full sun. And this is Happy Hour Fuchsia Portulaca. I also have a Happy Hour Rosita, which is a slightly lighter pink version. I have several lantanas in our gardens. These are actually tropical shrubs that they sell as small plants at the nurseries, usually in the spring around here now. And most people treat them like annuals. That is, they'll plant them, let them bloom, and just leave them out in the garden, then they die. And for a few years I've been bringing them in the house at the end of the fall, trimming them back first, and then digging them out of the garden, and then bringing them in the house. And they'll stay in the house happily with leaves on. Sometimes they'll drop a lot of their leaves, but as long as you keep them watered somewhat, they'll survive. And then you can pop them out again next spring and they'll do great. It takes them a little while to rejuvenate, get full leaf cover again and look real healthy, but once they do, they'll put out lots of nice blooms again. Now this one has perhaps suffered a little bit here because it's under this tree in this garden again, and they really do prefer full sun, but it's done fine and it's bloomed all summer long too. This one is called Lucky Pink. So that's Lantana Lucky Pink. And these are the two lantana shrubs that I've been bringing in for years now. They're out in big 2-foot pots, and you can see they're still blooming. The flowers have gotten a little smaller lately, but again, they're sort of in a semi-shaded area, which they shouldn't be. But they've done well, and I'll try to bring them in again this winter, so I'll cut these back by about 2/3 pretty well when the frosts approach. Bring them in the house, probably pot them into something smaller, and then they'll survive well until next year. This is Calibrachoa Super Bells Double Twilight. It's one of the small petunia-like plants that are very popular now at nurseries. You can get these in all kinds of shapes and sizes, and they're very hardy. You put them out in the nice soil in the sun and they spread all over the place and they bloom and bloom and bloom, so it's hard not to like them. And this is Calibrachoa hybrid Super Bells Holy Cow. Beautiful white flowers with pink interior parts of the petals with a yellow center. And here's a deep purple Calibrachoa mixed in with some deep red snapdragons. We also have some short yellow snapdragons in this garden. And these Calibrachoa plants are set between two Bidens plants as previously shown. I'm not typically a big petunia fan, but this year I tried a few out here in this garden and they've done really well, even though again they've been under somewhat heavy shade at times. But they've done well, and we've got these ones called Madness Summer, and then a few other varieties over here which I can't remember the names of. A nice yellow, pale yellow one, and another reddish one. Now we don't have many perennials still blooming in our gardens, but this is one that is, and it has been blooming steadily, even though very lightly, for all summer basically. This is blue flax. And earlier in the spring I weeded this garden quite heavily, taking out grasses and everything by the roots. And I was trying to be very careful to make sure I still had some blue flax remaining, and luckily I still do have 3 or 4 plants of it here. And this larger plant has been blooming regularly throughout the summer, as I mentioned, so hopefully it'll reseed itself. And they're very pretty, just a nice light, airy, long, spindly type of vegetation that they grow, and then these nice pale blue flowers. Back to the salvia theme again, and here's my row of common red salvia that you get at most garden stores quite easily. And these plants just love it out here. They're in a mostly sunny location, although they do get some shade here as well. But they love living here on top of this limestone garden edging I've put in here. And again, as you can see, they just keep on blooming until the frost comes. More and more each year, I'm really enjoying these large zinnias. They're a beautiful, easy to grow plant. These ones out here now are, some of them are over my head. They're 7 feet tall. And they bloom and bloom and bloom once they start blooming. And the bugs and insects and butterflies all love them. The bees are making good use of them now, again, because there aren't too many other flowers out here in bloom, and you can just see how tall they go here. Here's another type of beggar's ticks, and I think this is a different variety than the ones I've previously shown, but it might be the same. Just another viewpoint of the giant zinnia collection I have. It's basically taken over this end of the garden. That's one thing you want to be sure of if you do plant these in mass, is they do get tall. So again, if you can, keep them at the back of a garden, or if you have a wide garden, put them in the middle so they don't sprawl all over everything else. In the early part of this summer, I had an interesting occurrence where I believe a rabbit, possibly a deer, chewed a couple of these right off just as they were starting to get a bit larger. They hadn't developed flowers per se yet, but it chewed them right off, and I thought, oh God, those are gone. But it did cause the plant to branch out more and actually produce more flowers in the end, I think, than it was going to. And of course, the old standby, that's probably one of the most common garden plants you can find, is the old marigold. This is a mixture of various types, I believe, but generally the larger ones that get up to 3 feet in height. And I like them, but I do get a bit tired of them sometimes, and I keep saying, oh, I'm not going to put them in this year, and then I usually end up putting in some just because I have areas that they are really suited to. Now, for some strange reason, my Mexican sunflowers have gotten very, very tall, but they're only just putting out a couple blooms now. Now, they have more on stalk ready to come into bloom, but I'm not sure they're going to make it before the frosts come. We've got 2 flowers out now, right at the tops of the plants. One here, and you can probably see this one over here. And then there's a bunch of other ones starting to develop on the sides of the plants. And if we don't get frost for a couple weeks, they might make it, but otherwise they probably won't make it. And this tall plant here that I'm looking at, it's got to be 10 feet tall at least. So my suspicion is that this garden has become increasingly shady over the last few years because of adjacent tree growth again. And now these plants have to grow taller to try and reach the light. So they're spending most of their energy trying to grow tall as opposed to trying to put flowers out. So I've got to make some decisions in the near future, whether to clear out some trees around here or do some alternate strategies. I don't know. Put plants in here that don't mind a bit of shade. But I do like this garden, and it was created for sunny plants not long ago, so it shows you how fast things can change. Here's another annual I put in quite a few gardens usually. It's Verbena. This one is called Eyed Mixed. And I've got it set beside a Mexican heather here, known as Diana. And I believe the Mexican heather is an annual, but I'm not positive. I think it must be if it's still blooming. Nice little leathery green leaves on the Mexican heather. And here are the remnants of the flowering period from some of our hydrangeas. And the white flowers have disappeared, but it's left with these colored bracts, I think they are. And our patch of obedient plants has only a few flowers remaining. It was largely in bloom over a month ago in profusion, but now there's just these few little flowers here. Still a few of our cleomes or spider plants in bloom, but most of them have since faded away. Just a few of the latter blooming ones still hanging on. And this is one of our Dipladenias. We don't usually have these, but we did buy one this year. It's sort of like a house plant that you put out for the summer, and then you need to bring it in the winter if you want it to survive. It's a tropical plant that wouldn't survive here through the winter. But they have these glorious large velvet-like flowers. So that's a very pretty plant in bloom right now. It's not an annual, although I guess you could say it's an annual in a way. It wouldn't come up or stay through the winter. But it's more of a house plant really that you just bring out and hopefully survives the winter. We haven't tried one of these for a while. And this is one of the dahlias that we have still in bloom. Most of these this year we put in pots to make the extraction easier in the fall, because you have to dig up these plants' tubers as well to have them survive the winter. If you just left them in the ground, they would just rot away. So very nice plants, just a little more work to deal with them. They're sort of like canna plants. You have to dig up the roots in the winter and keep them in the house. Just another one of our planters that's still in beautiful bloom. Again, these are a variety of Calibrachoa mixed in with a begonia, and then there's some kind of an ivy falling out of it or trailing out of it. Very pretty. And here a lone geranium with white flowers with red centers with drooping ivy out the edge of the pot. Anyhow, there you go. I just thought I'd highlight those few plants to let you know which ones are really doing good in our gardens up here in southern Ontario at this time of year. And maybe I've given you a couple ideas for plants you might want to pursue next year. It really is a learning experience trying to figure out how all these different plants do at different locations and in different weather conditions and in different environmental lighting conditions. It's becoming more and more clear to me all the time just how important percentage of sun is in your gardens. Again, there are garden plants that adapt well to shady or partly shady conditions, but by and large, most of them prefer almost full sun, or maybe 80 to 90% of the day being in sun. Once you start introducing shade, and this is true for vegetable gardening as well, once you start introducing shade, the plants spend more time growing their vegetation to try and attain the light to gain their energy, so they spend less time producing the fruit or the flowers, whatever case you have there. So the more and more you can situate your vegetable and flower gardens in direct sunlight, probably the better. And if you can't, then certainly look for shade-specific plants or partly shade-loving specific plants, because they'll do a lot better. That's one change I'm going to really try and focus on next year, is to, for any annuals I get, really get ones that are specifically suited to the environmental conditions that I can provide them. And that also goes for soil as well. So those salvias that I've been showing all through here, they really like pure sun. The two new ones I focused on there, the blue and the purple one, are really the best situated of all the salvias I've got. They're out in basically full sun, whereas most of the other ones are in partial shade, at least for part of the day or what have you. So they haven't done quite as well, but they're all doing pretty well. So anyhow, I hope you enjoyed that video and you've got some desire to get out and work in your fall gardens and get ready for next spring's gardens. It's always a fun hobby to take part in and see how things come out each year. Thanks for watching.